on the side of your
by.
building, you know.
There you
But
go.
the problem is this is a university. It's a place for thought. It's a place for thought where they could have just had a panel discussion and a good opportunity to foster that thought. Yeah.
Look, you have a big army. We have a cannon.
So question, Chris. What then do we do with the people who are still offended by what it symbolizes? And I'm just asking.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that until you have till you have those discussions and talk it out and have something. I don't know the answer to that. But instead of the knee-jerk reaction of just saying, well, we're not going to do this anymore, boom, it's done. They didn't have the chance to do the discussions and have the thought and see if they could come to a consensus. That's where I think they missed the boat.
So let's look at the Confederate flag, right? And say that we put the same scenario with the Confederate flag, right? We use it as a teachable moment. We talk it out. You have people who believe that this should still be flown and it should still be, hanging up in certain government places. And after we talk it out, they still believe that. And the people who are offended by that symbol are still offended by that symbol. So what's the next step?
Well, I don't think that you can make a moral equivalence with the Confederate flag the way that it's looked at today. That flag has morphed into something that what it was in the beginning and what it is today is two different things. Like your discussion about the swastika and what it is in Hinduism, what it is today is what it's seen by the rest of the world is two different things. And I don't think that you could have that discussion around the swastika or the Confederate battle flag. This flag is different.
I don't think the Confederate flag can be any more grim than it was from inception. I don't think it can be any more horrific today than what it stood for on day one. Because on day one, it was about the enslavement of my ancestors.
Fair enough. That's the same point I'm trying to make. But this flag and what it stood for from the day that they used it, that discussion has never been had on that university. And what they're using it for has absolutely nothing to do with anything racist. It's a sports symbol. And they just didn't give them the chance to even talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, I look at that slogan, come and take it. I'd like to see somebody try to come and take Marcus Davis's liberty and his freedom. They better pack a lunch and some weaponry and everybody get some friends, because they not, it is consistent with his mindset. Don't come treading on my liberty. Anyway.
Right.
Hey everybody, welcome to Overtime. I'm going to defer to Chris Tritico. What do you want to talk about first, Chris? Something that we talked about during the show, or I'll just go back to this lawsuit. I think it's I want to hear from both of you lawyers on this. I obviously didn't have a lot of details. They're going to have a press conference tomorrow.
Well, that's the topic I was going to bring up. That's the topic I was going to bring up. I think that's going to be the biggest topic this week when they have the press conference. I brought up the old lawsuit from 40 years ago because it's the exact same issue that's been going on now and existed for 40 years. And I think Gary thought I was trying to deflect, but what I was trying to point out was that it's existed now for 4 decades with no commissioner's court having taken significant action to do anything about it. And that's the problem. This commissioner's court could have done something about it. The last one could have done something about it. All of them could have. So this one's going to have to deal with it now again. And I don't like a lot of the things that this commissioner's court has done, but now they're faced with this one more time. And something needs to be done about the infrastructure of our justice system. And I sit on 2 panels for the county about justice in Harris County, and action needs to be taken. And I've been screaming about this since the flooding of the courthouse. I've been trying to get them to build a new one, and instead they're pumping money into the old one and remodeling it yet again. It's just the system is the way they're handling the infrastructure of the justice system. I've disagreed with for many, many years.
Look,
I've often thought, Chris, that
Go
they
ahead,
should
Sue.
take the jail out from underneath the sheriff's department and have it be its own separate entity and separate those out, because it's just that's, to me, that would be more efficient, more effective. And you could advocate for people in the jail, guards and people that you need there, without at the same time advocating for more pay for deputy sheriffs.
There had been discussion about that, except that it falls directly under the sheriff's jurisdiction. And
Yeah,
it's
I
a
always thought that should be.
difficult prospect to get that handled.
Okay, I'm going to date myself here. I started my reporting career back in the 1980s when a federal judge in East Texas named Justice, interestingly enough,
William Wayne.
Justice, William Wayne.
threw a huge wrench into the system. And the heavily overcrowded Texas prison system threw it into disarray. There were multiple special sessions. Ann Richards wasn't certainly her priority, but it had to become one, tripled the size of the Texas prison system in order to meet, to get the Texas criminal justice system out of the control of the federal courts. Does this have the same potential here, Gary Polland?
No, I don't think so, because the justices' rulings and getting involved in our state prison system was related to massive overcrowding, and then the conditions that we kept prisoners in. I mean, none of our prisons had air conditioning. I mean, it was needed, and it forced their hand. The problem here is we have overworked and underpaid deputy sheriffs and correction officers in the jail. That's a problem. Number two, we have our jail is overcrowded. It's overcrowded probably the way they design it. But do you remember the answer from the Gang of Three led by Hidalgo was they wanted to empty the jail so we wouldn't have a giant COVID epidemic. And if I could segue into COVID, think about this. They keep telling us we have this huge COVID problem, right? I went to a football game 2 weeks in a row, or 2 out of 3 weeks at the University of Texas. First game, we had 100,000. Game last night, they had like 85,000. And the student newspaper here had a story saying they studied the results of what happened after the first game, and there was no appreciable increase in COVID positive cases. So if we're in this giant COVID epidemic, just a question, why is it that it should have been, I thought, a super spreader event if that was the case? I mean, we wore our masks when we came in because it was really crowded at the entrances. Once we got seated, we didn't. But nobody was wearing masks. So is there a big problem here or not? It's a question that I wonder about that we can do. But that was the justification for emptying the jail that Hidalgo and Ellis and Garcia were talking about. And it was stopped, and this is important history. They were going forward. The DA's office under Kim Ogg, who gets criticized at times rightfully, but other times unfairly, she tried to intervene in the case, and they said she had no standing. So to the rescue came Senator Betancourt, who got this attorney general to intervene. Otherwise, here's what happens, and Chris knows this. You have two sides in a lawsuit. You have the plaintiffs who sued, wanting to empty the jail, and you have the county commissioners basically deciding policy for the county. So they were prepared to vote to give a sweetheart deal to the other side, pay them millions in attorney's fees, and empty the jail. Now, do we think for 1 minute, if that had happened, that our massive increase in crime we already suffered would have dwarfed what has happened? It's unbelievable. This is a story that still hasn't been told. Part of the problem is it takes more than 1 minute to tell you the story. But the crime problem in Harris County should be laid at the feet of Hidalgo, Garcia, and Ellis. That is why it happened.
I want to be very clear here, and I believe Cuevas will say it tomorrow, that this is a nonpartisan deal, that it started with Republican-controlled commissioners' courts and continued with the current Democratic-controlled commissioners' court. So, in their idea, in their mind, both parties have plenty of responsibility for this.
Yeah, that may be true, but see, here's
Well,
what,
look, these are really dangerous jobs. First respond, they're dangerous jobs. They are. And when they haven't had any increase in pay for a very long time, then who wants to go work there? And
So
when people,
who
just like
hasn't
at
had an
Marcus's
increase in pay in a long
restaurant,
time?
huh? Well, the
Who is it?
deputies are saying
And the
they've had no
jailers.
increase. They're having more work, they're having fewer deputies, the population's growing. It's like at your restaurant, your restaurant grows, and then you bring in people so that you can give service to your customers. If you have a ton of customers coming in and you still have the same 3 original people that were working for you and you haven't added, guess what happens? You don't give good customer service. This is about customer service. It's about our public, our first responders serving the public by protecting them. But more people and less, there's no way that they can do their job. No
And
way.
Holly,
There's
hold
two
on, hold on.
classes.
And if it doesn't pay well, who's going to go take those jobs?
Holly alluded to this on the broadcast, but I was watching this testimony as well, and it happened at the very end of the commissioner's court meeting, which just happened to happen on a day a Category 1 hurricane hits our coast. But Sheriff Gonzalez was at wit's end, saying that, I mean, they're at critical mass down there. I mean, you could take a transcript of his testimony and take it straight to the plaintiff's attorneys in this and saying, like, look, he made the case for us. I mean,
Absolutely.
Holly, go
Yeah,
ahead.
absolutely. The sheriff is there, and it's interesting that he is named as a defendant in this lawsuit, which I have not seen the lawsuit. So, I think we're all still learning about it. But yeah, it sounds like what Gonzalez testified before commissioner's court. I mean, he's basically pleading with them to give him more resources to help manage the jail, to get the court system moving in Harris County. I mean, and I think Marcus alluded to this earlier. This is one piece of a complicated picture. I mean, it's a whole system, and there's different components that need to work together. And it's probably a great thing that they filed this lawsuit, because it may instigate, at least some action on this portion of it. But we also still need to get these courts moving. It's unfair to both defendants and victims to not be holding these jury trials. And we've got judges who are just not holding trials, and nobody's sure what's going on. Another interesting thing, after Gonzalez testified to the court, Lena Hidalgo expressed frustration about, getting conflicting messages from different portions of the county. And she said something along the lines of, is there somebody who can, give me an adequate report on what's going on? And so we're asking, well, isn't that what the Justice Administration Department was supposed to do for us, is consolidate that information? Clearly, that's not happening. Something else is going on with the Justice Administration Department. The director has resigned. No one's talking about it. No one seems to know what's going on. There are so many questions about, how the county is managing criminal justice right now, and it's affecting public safety. Everyone is seeing this.
So
Chris, and Holly is spot on, right? In terms of what the problem is. And the DA's office has been underfunded. They've been before the commissioner's court numerous times asking for proper funding. The public defender, what is their average case, Chris? 75 cases per public defender lawyer average per year.
Probably.
Or currently at one time. In the DA's office, if you're a felony prosecutor, you have an average caseload that exceeds 1,000. So you wonder why things don't get done. Chris will tell you what happens when we go to court, that they don't get a chance to look at anything because it's triage. So you got to get them to focus on your case when they have 999 other cases that they're getting pounded on. At the same time, they're set for trial 10 cases a week that they got to prepare for also. So they're grossly understaffed, but this is all part, Holly. This is a plan. The plan was to decriminalize crime. If we reduce the number of law enforcement officers, less cases will be filed. If we don't give the prosecutors what they need, they're going to have to start giving away cases or not take cases that are not as serious as some, even though they're still crimes, in order to keep their sanity and do their job. That's what's happening. So the money goes to the public defender. They got funded all they want, and they pay them more than prosecutors. And you wonder why things are gone wrong. This is at the feet of the Three Stooges. I'm telling you, they're responsible.
I agree, Gary.
They're in charge now.
Remember when Kim went and said, give me more prosecutors
Yeah.
so that we can move people through? And they're like, no, 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 no. That just means you're going to put more people in jail.
The,
I mean,
So the
that was
sheriff-
the logic to why they wouldn't give her the funding.
the sheriff is a necessary party to the case. That's why he was named a defendant in this case. He has to be because he's the head of the jail and the head of the department. But I want to say something. You know, Gary keeps talking about the sheriff and the way he's handled this in the county, but the sheriff did a masterful job of dealing with the inmates in the jail during COVID. And the Harris County Jail had the
I didn't
lowest
criticize him.
number of COVID patients of just about any facility in the country, in the way that he triaged the inmates and handled COVID through this. We had in Harris County about the lowest number of COVID patients in our jail system for about anybody in the country for a population of our size. And I give that credit to the sheriff and the way the plan he laid out, and the way that he handled this. He did a masterful job of that in keeping the COVID patients segregated in the way he handled it in a difficult time with very difficult resources. And one other thing I want to say before I let it go, there's two classes of individuals here on the pay scale. There's deputies and there's jailers. And the jailers are not deputies, and they get a much lower pay scale than the deputies
Terrible
get.
job.
And it's a horrible job. It's hard to do. And talk about underfunded and understaffed is the jail staff. The people in the jail who are monitoring the inmates. That's been an understaffed position for, as I said, the last 40 years. So we need more deputies, and we definitely need more jailers. And that's the two issues that this lawsuit is going to be about.
Right.
Yeah.
But
Hey,
if
Marcus.
this doesn't pay, if they don't bring this up to some kind of pay that people will accept to take these positions, you're not going to have anybody signing up. You can put all the money you want out there, but unless you pay people appropriately for the job that they are doing and the danger they put themselves in, and they feel like they're valued, then they'll go do something else.
Well, and they
Marcus.
need, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Holly. Go ahead.
Yeah, they need better pay, but we also need more staff, right? And
Correct.
we saw Tom Ramsey ask earlier this year for 50 additional patrol officers under the sheriff's department. And he was told basically we can't afford that. But as Sue has pointed out, we have,
They have $11 million now. How
we've
many
got
will that
$11
get
million.
us?
We don't know how
It's
many.
all priorities.
Somebody do the math. How many deputies will $11 million
Priorities.
get us?
Hey, Marcus, you're pretty well entrenched in the public square. Are we missing a big topic this week, or what's going on as a small business owner and employer? What do we need to be talking about in the coming weeks? What's on your mind? What are you keeping an eye out on?
We always talk about the small business, the cliche of small business being the backbone of our nation, but we truly don't believe that. And that's denoted every morning and every evening at 5 o'clock on the national news, where we talk about the stock market and how well it did, and whether the Dow did a great job, and the NASDAQ, and so on and so forth. But we have no barometer for small businesses and how well they fared on that day, that week, that month. I bring that up because there was a lot of talk about the PPP loans and all that good stuff at the start of the pandemic, and there's a little talk about it now. And what's happening in the business sector, the small business sector today, needs to be noted. Some of these small businesses, these Main Street businesses that went out for the PPP loan, are not being forgiven for a number of reasons. There are some that are, but some are not for whatever reason. And banks are making it a little bit more difficult for some of these small businesses than it's supposed to be to have it forgiven. But more importantly, it's supposed to convert into a loan if it's not forgiven. But some of the banks are not acting as though. One conversation with a banker was like, we need to get this paid off quick, fast, and in a hurry, versus stretching it out to the 2 years or 5 years that the SBA has authorized them to give it. So there are some businesses out here that are hurting as a result of not either getting the forgiveness that they need or getting cooperation from the banks on structuring that loan the way the SBA has authorized it.
My comment, I was going to say, Marcus, your friends need good lawyers to sue them. Okay, because they should have been able to qualify for forgiveness.
Sue, Chris, and Gary
Yeah.
all have their own businesses. I mean, are part of partnerships, LLCs, law firms. I mean, obviously both Chris and Gary are named partners in their firms. Principal.
Well, I had a printing and rubber stamp business long ago, and that's owning your own business is the hardest work there is.
And let me be drill down on this more specifically, and I'm biased because small business is the backbone of our nation, but
I believe that
the hospitality portion we make up the largest portion of that, right? And as you may or may not remember, a little while back, the United States Congress, the 535 people in DC actually did something worthwhile by putting together a restaurant revitalization fund, which started out, and then the lawsuit ended it, and then some of the people who waited in line for those funds didn't get those funds. And Congress has yet to replenish the funding for the Restaurant Revitalization Act. And everybody that loves to eat at restaurants needs to reach out to their congressional representatives to have that fund refunded, simply because restaurants and bars were the first places to be told shut down. And meanwhile, that response hadn't been reciprocated fully when it comes to making restaurants and bars whole again in our community. And that's the place that we love to go to, right? That's the place we miss the most and yearn the most. And during whether it's a hurricane or whether it's a pandemic, we hate the fact that we couldn't go to our favorite watering hole.
Hey, I sent you all an update, prior to the show, talking about what it appears the Biden administration, at the urging of Greg Abbott, is going to do with the onslaught down in Del Rio. They're talking about 2 to 5 airplanes a day going straight back to Haiti. Now, a lot of these people have been in South America and Central America for months. So if this strategy comes to fruition, by coming to the border, they may find themselves right back where they started. Any thoughts there?
I find it the height of hypocrisy for Joe Biden to adopt a Trump era policy now to just throw these people on a plane and send them back to Haiti. I'm offended by it. I think he ought to find a different way. He said, "I'm not Donald Trump. I'm not going to use Donald Trump policies." And then when something gets out of control, he says, "Oh, well, here's this policy we haven't revoked. Let's use it." I'm stunned.
If we had a hypocrisy police department, Marcus would be the chief of police at identifying hypocrisy.
That's because we got a lot of it going around, man. We got a lot of it going around, particularly with regard to parties and the preservation of power and the only thing that we're interested in. I mean, look, I hear and respect some of the folks, response to the jab or the vaccine and the liberties and all that kind of good stuff. But one of the things that we've said consistently, and I heard it from a Democrat, Sue, I heard it from a Republican, Bob, which is the government's responsibility for the preservation of life is their top priority. And if you haven't in this nation, those weren't my words, those were Sue and Bob's words, right? And if you have a threat in your nation, we're in the middle of an enemy, not on our doorsteps, in our nation. And we are using partisan politics and the preservation of power to separate us versus doing the right thing for the right reason and responding the right way. I'm not trying to take anybody's liberty away. I just don't want this variant to go from Delta to Mu to Omicron to Zeta. And then people end up, I'm sorry, I can't help it. My days of fraternity back in the day, you had to memorize all of the Greek letters of the alphabet, right? So,
go ahead, Gary.
I just don't want
let me
that.
chime in, and I understand what Marcus is saying, but in talking about the biggest hypocrite in the country at this point would be the Biden administration on the border and not checking the illegals entering to see if they're COVID positive, not requiring that they get shots if we're going to let them in the country. So we have hundreds and hundreds of thousands, maybe over 1 million people have come into the country illegally. And it doesn't matter if they're legal or illegal, not tested and not required to get a vaccination. So if the vaccination is good enough for us and we're going to mandate it on the American citizens, then why is it people who are coming into this country illegally or legally not being mandated too? Besides the fact we're also bringing in diseases, as I think you pointed out, Greg, that have been long gone, like measles and mumps and even polio.
Well, because you take a vaccination for those, that's why.
Yeah, well, because these people didn't, and they're coming from third world countries that don't have the health standards that we do. So it just tells you what a giant joke this whole thing is. I mean, the border is intentional. They intentionally opened the border. That's what it is. And what they should do is be honest with the American people. Look, we want open borders. Okay, there can be a debate on open borders. We can see where the American people end up. My guess is whoever supports open borders in most cases is going to get beat. That's one of the reasons, by the way, the Democrats in South Texas are losing support by American citizens of Hispanic origin who've had enough with the invasion. This is an invasion. That's why the mayor of Del Rio closed the bridge, not a Biden administration. It was the Democratic mayor of Del Rio that said, hey, I don't want 15,000 people in my city. That'll overwhelm everything. So we're going to close the international bridge. And all the commerce had to go 75 miles to the west in order to enter the country. So this thing is a huge issue. And I'll tell you why we know it's now a problem and why the Biden administration reacted. And I want to go with this flight thing. It's because it made national news on the other networks, NBC, CBS, and ABC, who before were never covering it. It was Fox, basically, covering it, and some of the other smaller networks who covered it had the drone. Remember, the Fox had a drone over the border, and then the FAA said, you can't have drones. That gets in our way. Well, that was all designed to censor. They don't want anyone to know what's happening. Well, now the word is out. And they got a big problem. And here's an interesting thing. Kamala Harris is supposed to be the border czar. And I understand that she was handed a hot potato by the administration, but she hasn't done anything. She went to a football game for alma mater, wonderful, while the border crisis is boiling. I don't get it. It's not out of sight, out of mind. The American people will understand what's going on.
Yeah, I agree with a portion of what you said, Gary, a good portion of what you said. The only challenge is you open it up by saying who was the bigger or the biggest hypocrite, and then dove into your partisan politics.
Well,
by saying
Kamala's in charge. I mean, I guess.
But all I'm saying is this is what the problem is in our nation. We want to highlight and harp on how big the problem is on the other side, and not talk about on the other side. We can say the exact same thing for Greg Abbott, who does not want to mandate masks in schools, but does want to mandate what happens in a woman's home in her body. You know, and that is complete hypocrisy. And if we can't talk about both, then we're going down a rabbit hole.
Look,
and
I'm ready
I agree Joe Biden did some terrible, is handling some of these things terribly. And he responded, due to public pressure. But I also agree that it happens on the other side. And until we're honest with ourselves about both of those things, man, we are Rome falling down.
Look, I'm not telling you Republicans are perfect. They're not.
Okay. Hey, we've reached that point in overtime where I asked the question, what did we miss? Think about it, you guys, or what's coming up this week? What's on your radar? I'm going to help out Chris because Chris and I have been watching some litigation that's going on in Spring Branch regarding representation. Was there any update this week on that, Chris? Chris, are you muted? Can y'all hear Chris?
No.
No, he said go on.
Okay, I'm going to go to you, Sue. What are you keeping your eye on right now?
Well, I want to say way to go Cougs last night. Big, good win. Congratulations, getting in the Big 12. That's exciting for the city. I think there's some things going on. over at the city, the partnership is not sponsoring the state of the city address. So the Houston First Corporation, which is an entity of the city, is producing and soliciting sponsors for this, and watching how this is folding out has been pretty interesting as to who sponsors are and the difficulties that they're having. I guess my question is, how does a city entity raise money for the city and do it ethically? So I think that's something that's been kind of below the radar screen, but actually it points to this thing about ethical stuff going on. And, you know, why not just skip the state of the city? We've got a lot of other things that are far more serious in this city to take care of, rather than, we all know the state of the city, and it's not really great right now.
Okay, I want to shout out to Holly because with a word of thank you, because she interrupted a transfer of household this weekend to be on this show because I wanted her expertise on the county stuff.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Holly.
I can't say I'm really bright and chipper this morning. I'm a little bit dragging here, but I appreciate the opportunity to weigh in.
We could not tell.
Thank you. It's you know, it's all an act, right? But yeah, I think there's a lot of county issues going on here. Criminal justice is going to continue to be a huge issue, especially going into these primary campaigns and the general election next year. You know, another issue that I think is on the horizon, we're all going to be talking about a whole lot, is redistricting. Is that going to get tied up in the courts? There's some question as to whether or not we'll actually be able to redraw those lines and until 2023, depending on what a court decides in the coming weeks. So everybody's watching that. We're watching where these lines are going to fall. And of course, it's going to be a huge battle.
Chris, we have you back?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, there's a lawsuit in Spring Branch over the single member districts, at-large districts for the school board. Not well publicized, but almost every member of the school board in Spring Branch lives in the same neighborhood, and almost all of them on the same street in Memorial. And there's some people who say, look, this isn't really fair representation for the whole district. The people on the north side of I-10, where I happen to grow up, are saying we don't have any representation at all. Last week, one of the school board candidates, who's going to be a school board candidate in the next election, filed a petition and intervention seeking to intervene in the lawsuit to be a plaintiff, saying the school board is not adequately representing people like me, and I want to be a defendant in this lawsuit and represent myself because I don't think the school board is going to represent my interest in this lawsuit as a candidate. We'll see what happens.
We shall see.
Okay, Marcus or Gary, y'all have anything else? I mean, Gary, as you talk to Republicans looking at the next cycle, what are the two big issues that they think they can make some headway with voters on in this community? I think we talked about some of them today.
Yeah, no, I think absolutely. I mean, I think actually the issue that I think is percolating that's going to end up being a big deal is corruption. I think that is people don't like corrupt politicians regardless of party. That's a big deal. The other thing I'm watching is the Attorney General's primary for the Republicans. There's a new candidate in the race, guarantees a runoff. And I think the more in there, that race, I think makes it maybe more difficult for Paxton to survive and get into a runoff because the number of votes being divided. So that'll be interesting. And obviously, I think the Democrats want to run against Paxton because of his, issues that he's had before office and while in office. So I think that's interesting. I'm also watching the HISD school board, and I find fundraising figures interesting. Is some of the insurgents running, African-American insurgents, are outraising their opponents. So, and it's a low-profile race, though the school board is really important, and HISD we know has its issues. So it'll be interesting to see if insurgents can actually get on the school board this cycle.
All right, we'll close.
Hey, Greg, I want to say one thing. Thank you for being on top of the $11 million contract. You stayed with it, and you're the one that shined the light on that. And I think you're responsible for it eventually being pulled down.
Well, and the other thing,
Holly did some great reporting too.
And Greg, you also did a great job getting the scoop on the deputy sheriff's suit against the county. That was good.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to go to our What's Your Point original, meaning an original, one of the originals, Marcus Davis, back 312 shows ago. Close us out, Marcus. What should give us some wisdom? I think you have more influence as an unelected former a person, an opinion maker and persuader than you would if you had political office.
Which is why I don't have a desire to run for political office. I don't want to get sucked into the partisan machine. So I'll give an original what we missed. I mentioned the football earlier, and if those who were offline didn't catch it, go back and watch the Hamilton Bishop Gorman football game. It is the definition of it's not over till it's over. But speaking of football, at a Miami University football game, fans ripped, I don't know if you guys saw this story, the cat story. It was at the University of Miami football game where fans ripped the American flag from a banner to catch a cat that was falling from the upper bleachers, right? Now, when the cat's life was saved, the crowd went wild. The TV commentators complimented the effort of the journalists and the effort of the folks there. And the journalists wrote articles celebrating those that saved the cat. But not too long ago, I seem to recall a young man who knelt for the so-called American anthem and the unrolling of the flag onto a football field in protest of police brutality that endangered the lives of Black men. Yet his effort to save Black men was labeled as disrespecting the flag. The question is it okay to physically use a flag to save a life, but not symbolically use it to save a life? Why is it okay to physically rip a flag from the banner for unintended purposes versus using it symbolically for the purpose in which it was intended? Democracy.
I call that a non sequitur.
Food for thought. Hey, everybody, have a wonderful week. Thank you for a great show. I think we had a good one today, and I think we had a good audience. I really hope that you'll join me again in the future because I appreciate each and every one of you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a
Thank
good
you.
day.
Thanks so
I'll
much.
have a good week.
Have a good week.
Good week, everyone.